15 years ago, when the idea of the game was first put forward, I was really quite excited. It was an interesting creative project, and I thought a game would be great fun. But as it progressed and we began to develop it, I realised it had enormous potential as a transformation tool. And I'd been looking for something to use with clients in counselling sessions, but I also wanted to put something out there that people could use as a team building thing, as a family therapy that you could get to know people with. And the game just had all of these elements in it, and it enabled people to be able to work their way through all of that inner dialogue that stands between them and what they really want. One of the things I noticed with clients is that they're full of questions, and they really actually have the answers inside them, but they can't find it because there's too much going on in their head. And the process of the game gives you the opportunity to bring those things out, look at them, cast them aside, so by the end of the game you've got the answer to your question. No matter what that question is, you'll have the answer to that question. I guess it's quite a feminine game. People comment on that. And I'd have to say there's a great deal of my heart in this game. It's not only that I've got a passion for it, it's like everything else I do, I just have to pour myself heart and soul into it, and there's a lot of me in this. And people often comment that they hear my voice when they read the cards, maybe because I do a lot of talking, I don't know, but I designed the board, and also I was looking to include the things in it that I knew needed to be touched on as far as this process of self-revealing is concerned. And I was very grateful for the years of experience that I'd had as a counsellor for this. My name is Jennifer, and I'm on Possible because I really want to give this project some wings. I've been working on it for 15 years, and like any great project in your life, you keep it too close to yourself, and in the end you have to let it go into the world. You have to give it a chance to stand on its own 2 feet or 4, as the case may be. And this one, I feel I actually owe something to the game. It's taken me personally on an incredible journey. I've had opportunities to play it with some extraordinary people. I've had some very moving experiences. I've played it with some very vulnerable people, people with disability, young people in crisis. I've also played it with some very funny and very stubborn people, and had some amazing experiences with that as well. And what excites me is that the game seems to have a way of dealing gently with the vulnerable, and being quite challenging to those that aren't. I'm a painter and a sculptor and a performance artist. And over the years, because I have such a strong spiritual curiosity, I guess, I did my honours thesis in shamanism, in fine art. And that's actually where the core idea came from for the game, about the idea of the shamanic journey, the journey through yourself. And I don't think there was ever a time in my life when I didn't create art. From the time I was very, very small, it's always been my passion. I went to art school for the first time when I was 16. That's a checkered other story, but it's been a lifetime progression with me, the exploring of my inner worlds through art. And it's the only thing I've ever made art about. And so this was a perfect fit, and probably why I also went into art therapy, because I saw it working in myself, and I realised its potential as a tool for therapy. Art therapy is can be used for any situation. I personally, most of the people I worked with were due to trauma, past childhood trauma and loss, particularly grief therapy, that sort of thing. And art has a way of moving past the spoken word, getting to your unconscious without you having to fumble for it, because it just rises up once you lose yourself in the process of drawing or whatever the creative project is. And you don't have to be an artist to have access to this, because that's what art does. It opens the doors to the unconscious. Well, my approach is shamanic, which might not be sound a very contemporary sort of approach, but it's about the interconnectedness of all things, and it's something I saw in therapy, and it's something that I've witnessed in life, and it's about our being out of set with all of those connections that causes the distress in our lives. So anything that helps us get into the flow of that connectedness of life is a healing process, and that's what I find about art, and that's what I tried to get into the Shaman Journey game, ways of helping people connect with the flow in their life. It varies. It's particularly good with young people because they're much more open and have less reserve about something that seems new and out of left field. And I think the fact that it's so much fun makes a lot of difference, because people start to laugh and it generates great conversation, and the next thing you know, you're lost in it. It's drawing it out of you, and once people begin to play together, after a very short time they can start giving each other really good reflections. And this can happen quite spontaneously and synchronistically, because you might have come together with a group of strangers to play the game, and yet you find there are reflections of things, because after all we're generally working through universal struggles, and finding another reflection of that same struggle on the other side of the table in the face of a stranger can be very rewarding. The progression has been, was intensive to begin with, and I would trial it with friends and get reflection back from them, and watch them like a hawk while we were playing, to see what was working for them. And I played with friends because I knew them very well, and I would be able to see perhaps what was happening for them that they might not be seeing, what was within themselves, because I knew them so well. And then after the intensive program, there were a few years when it went through a constant editing process. Not easy for a dyslexic, so I was never quite confident about getting everything right without the help of friends. So it's had a lot of energy from friends, struggling with those difficult things called words. The game starts with the process of people writing their question, and this is a very important part of the game. People need to have a very clear question, nothing airy-fairy or too wordy, because you won't be able to focus on it while you're playing. The questions are written, and then each player has to in turn speak their question out loud. Now this can often be the very difficult start to the game, because actually putting that question out into the air can be a little difficult for some people. And it might be, why do I have so much difficulty in relationship? Why do I do so badly in job interviews? The question can be about anything. Once the question is read and spoken out into the world, you place your hands into the little leather pouch, and whatever gemstone slips into your fingers is the one that you'll use as your game piece. And that gemstone has a meaning, and the meanings are in the instructions, and everything in this game has meanings, and the gemstone is the first clue to your question. So for instance, should you have chosen the tiger eye, you'll know that courage is an element that's needed in the answering of this question. If, for instance, it was the crystal point, then, you know, clarity is something that needs to be looked at, and so on. Once the pieces are ready to go and you've got your order of players, which is designated by a dice throw, of course, like all good games, people set off around the board, and each person's journey around the board is absolutely individual. There are three worlds: the everyday world, the unconscious, and the what we call the upper world, which is about your mental attitudes and your spiritual attitudes. And people's progression around those, or even if they enter them, has everything to do with their question. There's no set track in this game. It is absolutely driven by the nature of the question. They collect cards as they go. Now the process of the game is measured by bone cards. It's as if when you posed your question, you deconstructed yourself. And in this process you have to collect 10 bone cards, which will be your marker of your reconstruction. And those bone cards can be gifted to you if you land on the bone card square, or they're given to you as a prize with affirmation cards. So when you've got something right and it's supporting you in that, it will give you a bone card. However, the burden cards, which are about the challenges of your perhaps difficult thinking in something, they will take the bone cards away. So getting 10 bone cards doesn't sound very difficult, but keeping 10 bone cards can be very hard, particularly in the beginnings of the early stages of the game, when people are perhaps struggling a little bit with that resistance. They can lose far more cards than they manage to hold on to. But as the game progresses and insight is gathered, the game gets quicker and quicker for that particular player. Bone cards build up, and then they only have to be in the upper world and land on the heart square, and they're ready to go out.
Okay.
I think it will depend on the person as to whether it takes right to the end of the game to get the answer to your question. But I think generally you would have to say that it's a gradual process. It's like more and more light comes on. Some people are very organised and they write down everything in pieces of paper, on pieces of paper, and when you play the game you provide people with paper and a pen for just that reason. And in the process of writing it down, they really begin to see the pattern that's working for them, and it's becomes very clear to them fairly fast. With others, it takes all the way to the end of the game before they can sit back and go, right, you know, that question has been answered. You can play the game with friends, but it's just as interesting when you play it with strangers. The situations I've found quite interesting is where there've been a family group And I particularly like those because often there are members of the family who don't have a voice. Also, parents may have no idea that there is something, that a child may be dealing with an issue. Their question might come as a real surprise to the parent, and watching their child go through this and read the cards and deal with the challenges of the game can be incredibly revealing in a way that wouldn't happen in normal conversation because it might never come up. And the process of playing the game means that for that time, when it is that child's turn, they have the absolute attention. They are able to speak and say what they need to say, and everybody listens, and that's a very empowering thing for young players particularly.
So
it depends what you want to take away from the game. Now, if you're looking for great entertainment, meaningful entertainment, it is a great after dinner party game, and I think we all enjoy good conversation, and at very least it produces some really good conversations. But if you are looking to take something greater away from it, if you really are perplexed by your question and you're looking to transform something in your life, then the tool will do that. But it's absolutely up to the individual as to what they want to take away from the game. Some people are too private and they just can't quite get into it. But what they take away from the game is reflections in other people. Now, they might not have been able to admit to it themselves, but they did observe those reflections. So they take it away and they think about it later. That's why we encourage people to make notes when they're playing the game, to write down cards that have come up for them so that they can mull those over in privacy at a later date and let it filter through. So there's a great deal that can come out of it that doesn't necessarily happen at the table. I can only tell you about the things that people have taken away from it, from those that have been able to articulate that to me. And I've had some wonderful experiences in the last 15 years where I might have got a bit lost in one of the twists and turns of my somewhat twisty-turny life, and somebody will find me out of the blue and say to me, "I'm so glad I found you. I really wanted to tell you how that game transformed my life, how important that game we played together was, or that game I played." And watching some of the people play that I have over the years has been a great privilege, because some of those transformations have been profound, particularly I think with the vulnerable people. And I've played some games with school groups and with people with disabilities in the Colac area, and also with the Lighthouse Foundation in Melbourne, were kind enough to let us play with some of their vulnerable young people. And the power of the questions that they asked was incredible, and what they took from it was testimony to the amount of courage and passion that they brought to playing it. One of the things that the receptionist said to us, "What is that thing that you're doing?" And I said, we're playing a game, the Shaman journey game. And she said, "But I thought it was very serious." And I said, "It can be." And she said, "We have never heard laughter like that before in this place." She said, "It's so hearty, not hysterical, hearty, because it just does that. I don't know why. It lifts the spirits in such way that laughter is inevitable." One of the things that was also really apparent was the difference in the kids once they got up from the table. They were 10 foot tall. when kids are really vulnerable, getting this kind of information about themselves, asking questions that are really important to them and getting an answer is incredibly empowering, because they know they haven't been handed it. They've worked it out for themselves. It's been revealed and they've understood it, and they've seen the truth of it because they hear it in themselves. To see them get up and walk down the hallway with their heads held high, you know, beaming, smiles beaming, and wanting to tell everybody about the nature of their game and what they learned, and it was just awe-inspiring. When you're playing with an older group, and particularly those who are a little set in their ways, one of the things I notice is that the amount of challenges that come up early in the game are far greater. It's almost like they've got to go a few rounds with the game, work up a bit of a sweat before they start to let their barriers down. And when you see people beginning to let those barriers down, then the game moves faster and faster, and more insight begins to flow. Also, I think people need a little time to feel comfortable with the people at the table, and to recognize that everybody is taking their own personal journey, and that it isn't that they aren't being judged on their journey or their question, that it's about mutual support while journeying on an individual journey. You can actually state the amount of time you want it to take. When we were playing at the Lighthouse Foundation, we only had a 2-hour window. So we were able to keep the games to 2 hours. From start to finish, we managed to get everybody over the finishing line, shall we say, in 2 hours. In other situations it may take longer, particularly if you have people who are a little resistant, because they need to take a few more rounds before they start letting go. But you can control the game. There's, you know, it can be a temptation sometimes to just wander off into great conversation, but by bringing people's focus back to their question, then they refocus on what they're doing, and the journey gets a little faster. There are certainly circumstances where a facilitator is very useful, particularly in a therapeutic situation. It gives people a chance to get an added reflection to their journey, and if that facilitator is an intuitive sort of person, it can add a great deal to the game, because they're watching and they're not playing, so they can pick up anything that the player might have not noticed. As far as playing it for the first time without a facilitator, I kind of think it's part of the game of discovery, to work out how it works and to work out the nuances. And I think it's true of most games, but I think with the Shaman Journey game, people who have their own game have a tendency to decide how they want it to work, and they play it their way. And that may well vary from game owner to game owner. No, the only qualification is that the person be familiar with the game, that they are not, that they're the sort of person who can facilitate, which means not be in judgment and not feel the need to tell people or even to suggest to people. But their job is literally to keep the flow going, to be a check and balance for lack of focus, and to pick up on the little nuances that others might have missed. For the past 15 years I've been producing this game pretty much on the kitchen table, doing it in very small batches, which was all I could manage to create with the situation and the funds I had available to me. Because I wasn't able to put it into proper production, mostly it was handmade and sourcing parts from other places. In putting this into production, it will allow me to produce them in greater numbers, of course, but also in a more accessible price. But I didn't want to lose the cottage industry aspect of it. I mean, maybe because I feel like there's so much heart in this game, I couldn't bear the thought of it being produced somewhere far away by faceless people who had no idea what it was and didn't know how special it was. So I thought what I really wanted to do was produce it in my own little hometown, and it's a very small town, and there's not much going on there, and I thought this would be a great place to have a little factory and produce it, and able to not just provide some employment for people in my town, but also to offer them the opportunities that the game has offered me, because there's something about being part of the process that just brings about enormous change in your life, and if I can offer that to somebody else, then that's a great thing. Well, there's two reasons for crowdfunding. I've seen some projects go up on Possible. I love the idea of crowdfunding, and it appeals to me because when you are in limited circumstances, and let's face it, most artists in this country are, sometimes you're literally crippled by financial things. You want to give something wings and you just don't have the wherewithal. But it's more than just finding financial support for this. It's about it coming from the place that you want it to go. If you get a good response to this, then you know that there's a real home for it out there. And that's what I'm looking for in this process, is to know that there's a real home for it, that it has a place in the world, and that in finding that on Possible, then you're given the means to get it out into the world. And if there's no response, then you know that this is just going to be one of your many projects that slips back into the distance. But I feel like the timing is right for this. It's been incubating for a long time, and I think it's time for it to get up on its feet and start its journey. I need the money for technology. It's mostly all technology that I'm requiring. Large format printers, a big guillotine, laser printers, so that these things can be mass produced. When I was producing them myself on the kitchen table, it was an incredibly labour intensive and slow process, and that diminishes the power of the project for me. If you're labouring away for many hours doing quite menial work, it tends to change the energy that you can put into a project. There's also two other games that have flowed out of the Shaman Journey game and the development of it, and if I can get the technology to produce the Shaman Journey game, then I also have the technology to produce the other two games, one being a single version of this and the other being a more, shall we say, universal version of the Shaman Journey game. Differences, but the core intent the same. Okay. I'm looking for $25,000, which will give me the technology I need to get the project up and running, and I'm hoping that you will find the rewards as exciting as I feel to offer them. There'll be games, of course, the standard game, but also a special game which will have a lot of handmade elements in it, and I'm really looking forward. I'm quite excited about producing those, and things that I'm sure will give you great pleasure and satisfaction, not only in knowing that you have these gifts, but also that you've been part of this journey. And when you play the game, I think being part of the journey will become significant to you. I have a website, theshamanjourney.com, and there's a Facebook page, and I'm hoping in the 90 days of this project people will want to keep connected and keep involved. I want to put up updates on there and tell you about the process of this whole campaign. And I want to do this because I would like to think that people get more than just putting some, giving some support and waiting for their game to arrive in the mail, that they are in actual fact taking part of in the process itself and getting involved in the journey.